Hey, what's up guys, welcome back to my channel, and it's finally here. I'll be doing a fire tier list for PvE, and I hope you guys are excited. I probably have more knowledge about fire than the previous frost tier list, so hopefully my tier list will be a bit more of an accurate representation of how good these fire cards are in PvE. Without further ado, let's dive straight into this video. Alright, and for our first card we have the Aura of Pain. It's basically dealing some damage around your enemy units or even buildings. For this it costs about 90 power for a full upgrade. The normal cost would be 100 power. I feel that this is a card that is not worth putting in your deck especially if you have a mixed color deck, but even for pure fire there are better options than putting Aura of Pain. So honestly it's not entirely useless, but I'll put it as a D tier for Aura of Pain. This time we got Backlash, and Backlash is the card that can create an explosion which deals current void power and additional 330% or whatever is your card upgrade to enemy units. What I feel about this is that Backlash isn't that useful. I mean, it's a tier 3 card, costs 120 power, and it seems that it can do a lot of damage, but you need to have a high void power, and usually for games you really want to keep your void power down. And for fire you have the Shrine of War, which can tremendously bring down your void power. So why would you want to collect so much void power and cast this spell? It's very circumstantial. You need to have a very high void power. So I'll just put this as a C tier. Okay, next up is the Banner of Glory. Basically, Banner of Glory, any of your friendly units die, you gain back power. I think it's about 33% power immediately to your power pool. The rest goes to your void power. I've never seen a fire that uses this asset for very specific plays. So Banner of Glory, I mean, I would put other units in, like, I don't know, Sunstrider, Sunderer. They are more valuable tier 1s to put in than the Banner of Glory, so I'll put it as a D tier. And next up we got Battleforge, and Battleforge recently has been nerfed, both the fire and the purple affinity. Basically the infused purgatory, it does not stack with other spells. So if you cast Unholy Hero on Battleforge, the spell, or basically the ability, has a fixed damage, and the Unholy Hero or whatever buffs that you're going to apply to Battleforge only applies straight for his direct melee attack. A combination of both fire and the Shadow Affinity Battleforge, there's more synergy for this, because for Shadow Affinity Battleforge it's more specific now, because you can see that it reduces or rather increase damage taken for enemies. So in combination for the fire and the Shadow Affinity, I think it will work very well. I will consider both an S tier card. Still an S tier, still a really good card. More than that, I feel that it's not an overpowered card, but it's more balanced. So I think the update did a bit of justice to bring down these Battleforge decks. Right, next up we got the Blaster Cannon. We got the Red and the Shadow Affinity. Basically the Red Affinity has Rage, deals more damage the longer it attacks the enemy. The Shadow Affinity has an Aura that deals damage to ground units. This Blaster Cannon is actually a really good air defense card. But tier 1 usually don't encounter much enemy air units, and you got the Sunstriders, which deals quite a bit of damage. So honestly, I would rate the Rage one, the Fire Affinity Blaster Cannon, higher than the Shadow Affinity. So the Fire Affinity will be a C tier and the Shadow will be a D tier. Next time we got the Bloodthirst, and this card recently gained some buff. This is an aerial cast. So basically, when you cast Bloodthirst, 8 of your units can get this buff, and as long as they deal 400 damage, every 400 damage it deals, you can heal 200 life points for the next 4 seconds. And I think this is really good. On top of that, your units will enter a frenzy, and they deal more damage. Yeah, so Bloodthirst is really a very good card, really good combination. I would say this is really an A tier card. Next, Boom Brothers, similar to the Bandit Gunner, but for tier 4 and a large unit, XL counter, I feel this is a little bit underperforming for this card. Boom Brothers, I'll put it as a D tier. Next, the Burning Spears is one of the newer cards out there. This is a really versatile card. It's a small unit and it can swap between a L counter and XL counter. It's a very versatile card. On top of that, it has Steadfast, which Burning Spears can't be knocked back as compared to Rage Claws. So I would think actually Burning Spears, I've tried the card, is really a good card, although a little bit on the pricier side, 80 power, but I'll put it as a B tier. Next, we have Cluster Explosion for both the Red and the Fire and the Shadow Affinity, and of course for the Fire, Cluster Explosion is an S tier card. You got to use the card to understand why it's an S tier. Basically, it can demolish a lot of the enemy, as the more enemies there are, the better these cards work. And for the Shadow Affinity, it's pretty good as well, but not as great as the Fire Affinity one. So for honestly the Shadow one, I'll put it as a B tier. Next, we have the Comet Catcher, the lesser version of the Worldbreaker gun. Why I say that is because when you cast this Comet Catcher, it takes about 10 seconds for the attack to take place. However, when you build the Comet Catcher, there's no cooldown. So good bad side. However, this is a bit more restrictive ops wise because 3 fire ops, but this is a really high damaging card if you know how to play it. Honestly, for me, I would put it as between a B and a C tier card, but overall I would just put it as a C tier card because if you play in a really big map, chances are it will be out of range. For single player maps might be better, but again, single player maps, you can just finish most of it with units. Next up we got Disenchant, the Nature and the Shadow Affinity one. For the Shadow one, it removes buffs from hostile or even a friendly unit. However, for the Shadow Affinity one, hostile unit is more targeted toward hostile units. They cannot gain any major buffs, but on the other hand, for your Nature Affinity one, your units are immune to special effects like paralyze or freeze, which is why Nature Affinity Disenchant tends to work better. So for the Nature Affinity, I would put it as an A tier. For the Shadow one, yeah, it's really difficult for PvE campaigns, hostile units to buff themselves. So honestly, I'll put this as C or D tier, but because it helps to debuff your friendly unit, I'll move it to C tier. Dying Breed, this one is F tier because you have no use. For both affinity, I'll put it as an F tier. And next up we have the Earth Shaker. Earth Shaker is really good for destroying structures. However, if you were to notice, Earth Shaker is a tier 4 card, not very useful at that late game. D tier. Next we have the Ember Strike, and Ember Strike more useful than the Boom Brothers because it is not dazed and a little bit more versatile here and there. So for beginner, yes, you should have it in your deck if you do have all the nice extra large fire cards. Next up we have Enforcer. This is a really good card for PvP. For PvE, there are better cards to use like the Fire Stalker, when the Fire Dancer, but it's not a bad card for PvE, just not as good as PvP. So Enforcer will be a C for PvE. Next we have Eruption. Eruption is a very good card. However, sometimes if you use it too much, it's not really good for your power, and it's better you'll be better off summoning more units instead. But overall, Eruption as a last minute defense or attack is a good card. Put it as a B tier. Next up, Fire Dragon, supremely great card. The rage is amazing if you play Titans. But yes, because of its rage, the Fire Dragon is really great at maximum damage. Fire Dragon is definitely an S tier for me. Fire Spear is really great in dealing damage. Even though there's this 10 seconds waiting time, but it's more of like when you're gonna send your units just to gain the ground presence and cast this to eliminate really a lot of enemy units or even buildings around. So surprisingly, I'll rate Fire Spear as a B tier card. Next up, Fire Worm, which has been buffed, more on the card charges. Now it has 8. Yeah, I really like when you can just summon the Fire Worm, and one of the few fire cards that has really good range attack. So plus the card charges, because Fire Worms are typically quite easy to kill, the charges really help a lot. So Fire Worms to me is an A tier. Next we got Firebomb. Not very useful in PvE. I'll put it as an F tier. Fire Dancer is an S tier card. My mistake. S tier card. Really long range, siege, knockbacks, small units. At tier 2 is really overpowered. Fire Stalkers, if you don't have Fire Dancer, that is the one that you want to go for. Fire Stalkers can really do a lot of structural damage as well with its long range. Not as long as Fire Dancer, but very useful as well. So A tier. We got the Fire Swan next, and usually not a lot of people will use Fire Swan because this is really targeted towards L units, and usually people start with the Nomad, Sunstriders and Sunderers for tier 1. Fire Swan isn't a bad card, and yes, there are some maps that there are really strong tier 3 units or large units in the game, and Fire Swan would be a very good card to use. I would honestly rate both of them similar at a C tier. Next we got Giant Slayer. Typically this is a PvP card, and there is almost no reason to use it in PvE, so it's an F tier for PvE. Gold Power is F tier as well, no complaints whatsoever. Next will be the Gladiatrix. Alright, Gladiatrix, the green one is more of the Swift. We always want the Swift more, and it's similar to Disenchant. For the nature one, it's similar to the nature Disenchant without the immunity. Shadow is similar or the same as the Shadow Disenchant. Honestly, I'll rate the Swift highest as a B tier because it has a Disenchant effect, and for the Shadow will be a C tier. Next we have Global Warming, F tier. Infernal Machine, it is expensive to build. Fire don't have a lot of good towers, so because of that it's an F tier straight. Infernal, who's gonna use 300 power to hold 12 meteors? There's many other spells that is better than this. We have the Cluster Explosion, but it's tier 4, costs almost half less than Infernal. Juggernaut is a very good card, no denying it. It's good because of the Stampede, getting rid of structures. Lava Field is a B tier for me. Magma Fiend, even though they removed the slow and reduced the power cost for the ability, I don't think that it is a very good card yet. But it's not an F tier, definitely. As you can see, the following F tiers is terrible. But yes, I would put it as a D tier. Magma Hurler, surprisingly, is a really good card because of its range attack, and it can be very strong in big numbers. So for beginners, similar to Amber Strike, I would recommend you to have it, but it is better than Amber Strike, so it's a B tier. Next, Magma Spore. It only attacks air units, which is not very helpful, and the ability to attack ground units, you need to use some power. F tier. Next, we got Makeshift Tower to knock back small units, and not very good is a D tier because sometimes when you knock back units, there's some remnants, especially for range units, and you can't damage them because they are too far apart. Next, got Mine, S tier. I don't have to explain, it has really good damage. Moloch is a C tier. Mainly people use it as a tank. Mockley Trap, a little more useful than Firebomb. I'll rate it as a D tier. Mortar Tower, it's a really good defense card, and you need to be really skilled to use it. Last time it was overpowered where you don't have to have any ground presence to use Mortar Tower, so honestly I'll put it as a D tier now. Nomad, Fire, and Nature are good in different sense. So Fire I'll put it as actually really depends how you play, but I like Nature Affinity more because usually I'll use the Nomad to tank damage or just to clear maps, and the heals make them pretty good. I'll rate it as an A tier for the Nature one and the B tier for the Fire one. Next we got Oracle Mask. Honestly, these two affinities, they are not impressive. I've used it. Next is the Pyromaniac. The Fire affinity one is insanely strong because of its rage. I put it as the A tier. It's one of the few towers that is really good for fire. Frost one, I'll put it as a D tier. Next I got Rage Claws. I'll put it as a C tier because honestly Rage Claws are really tanky for fire card, and the longer they attack, they do become really strong. Rallying Banner, I'll put it as a C tier card. Really good to have not dazed units, you want to spam units as well. Ravage, one of the few healing fire cards, and so it is really very useful. A tier, although you need to have your units in combat in order for it to activate. Rocket Tower is not good because if there's only one unit attacking, it can only summon one like rocket, which is a little bit pathetic to be honest. So it's an F tier to me. Next got Scavenger. Scavenger is good for countering air size units, so, and with the Swift as well. For me it's a C tier. Next got Scorched Earth, which is not very useful for PvE. Although for the Fire Affinity there's a little bit of use because structures deal 20% more damage. You are well off having a siege unit, so D tier for the Fire and the F tier for the Shadow one. Next we have Sign Fiends. Quite rare to have an S counter, and it is pretty tanky. I'll give it a tier C. Shrine of War is an S tier. The rate you gain back Void Power is amazing. It's got Skyfire Drake. To me, it's an A tier. Right, next up we got Spitfire, and Spitfire is a really good card. Long range siege. So for Spitfire, I'll put it as a B tier. Next up we got Strikers, and Strikers is an F tier because it's very expensive to summon for tier 1, and stats isn't that fantastic. So next time we got Sun River, and we got both the Fire and the Nature one, and honestly for both of these cards I'll put it as an F tier because we have the Magma Hurler, which is better. We got the Juggernaut. Spitfire is better than this as well, and I wouldn't summon the Sun River. So I got Sunderer. Sunderer I'll put it as an A tier card because has Siege, is the only large unit. Sunstriders is A tier also because recently it's been buffed with the Siege, basically one attack more for structures, and also of the suppression ability. This time we got suppression, and if I were to rate it, it will be a C tier. For PvE, you really want to make full use of your 20 card in the deck. It's got Termite Heal, very specific play but not entirely useless, so it's a D tier. Tux recently has this buff of the gang up and other features. I've not tried it, but I've played it in the Forge and it's pretty fun. So free like Unity as well. I put it as a B tier. Then you got Thunder Vagrant, and the Fire one, basically you got Siege, and the Shadow one explodes upon death. So obviously I always opt for the Siege one because when you do the Rampage, it deals more damage to structures and it knocks back a lot of the units up to L size. I'll put it as B tier for the Fire one and a D tier for the Shadow one. Next up we got Tower of Flames, and this is a D tier. Okay, next up we got Unity, Frost and Nature. You can use both of them together, but I would prefer the Nature purely because of its healing abilities. I'll put it as an A tier. If you use a pure fire, you must have Unity inside. So for the Frost, I'll put it as a C tier card. Yeah, so we have Virtuoso, and honestly I don't use this card a lot, and I think it is pretty useless, but you might surprise me. So you can just write down in the comments what you think of Virtuoso. So we got the Volcano, and I always prefer the Rage one, however, a Volcano that heals himself is pretty impressive. So I'll rate it as a B tier card. The Rage as a B tier card as well. Next I got Voodoo Sex and F tier. Honestly, I feel it's F tier. It's got Vulcan. It's a D tier. It just spraying flames. There's no special knockback. There's no siege or whatever. It's just a normal card. Next I got Wallbreaker. It's a D tier. It's not entirely useless. Next got Warlock, and I can see some sort of use for Warlock. The Frost ability basically deals more damage to frozen targets. I don't know why for that, but the Fire ability enables friendly units to do 15% more damage, which is a bit more useful. However, I just put it as a C because Fire units in general deals a lot of damage already. But for the Frost one, I'll put it as an F tier. This type got Wildfire, and it's a card that is more useful in PvP, so it's a D tier. Next we got Wrecker, and for this card, I'll put it as a C just because of its ability where you can summon units without it being dazed. And that's it for the Fire tier list, and let me know in the comments what you think of my tier list. Is it better than the Frost one? More accurate description of the power of the PvE cards. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time.